In the lecture on functional dependencies, we observed that the redundancy is going to create problems, and we have seen what are the types of redundancies, what are the types of problems that are caused by redundancy. Now, as one of the solutions, it is observed that if I decompose the schema into smaller schemas, then the problem of redundancy may be reduced. And if I decompose, there are again certain issues. In the original ER diagram, design of the ER diagram, we have started with a schema with an intention of storing certain data, attributes of certain objects at one location. And later, if we observe the redundancy part, we felt that we need to decompose it into smaller schemas. Now, because of that, there are certain other issues may creep in. Something like the original data, if designed over the ER diagram, the schema, original schema designed through ER diagram, is storing, let us say, some 10 attributes of an object, database object, in one table. That means all the 10 attributes, the information regarding 10 attributes are combined together in one tuple. So if I take tuple, I'm getting the information of all the 10 attributes of that particular object at one location. There is some intention behind that. But now, because of the decomposition, what happens is the same object has attribute values at two different locations. Now, because of the two schemas decomposition of the schemas. Then, if I require, can I get back to that original schema or original instances? Can I get back at any point of time if I require? Because there is some kind of association is there among the attribute values of that particular object. With an intention, we have created it. But because of the decomposition, that association is lost. We need to establish that association somehow. And if required, I should be able to get back. So that is intention. That is exactly what is called lossless join decomposition. So even if I decompose, can I get back the original data if required? And if I can get it, under what conditions can I get it? This is the concept of lossless join decomposition. And let us put it more mathematically. Let R be a schema, let F be a set of function dependencies holding an R. And suppose R is decomposed into two schemas, R1 R2. Then the decomposition is said to be lossless if for any instance of small r, of capital R, for any instance, if I can get the same instance R by a natural join of the instances of the decomposed relations. So pi R1 of R is the instance pertaining to the attributes that are decomposed into R1. That's what the notation says. Pi R2 of R is the instance consisting of the attributes decomposed into R2. So I got two smaller instances, pi R1 of R and pi R2 of R. And if I perform the natural join of the instances, I should be able to get the original instance corresponding to capital R, the schema capital R. So if it happens for every instance, then the decomposition is said to be lossless. We'll see how it becomes lossless, or other things we'll see later, but this is how the lossless join decomposition can be defined. There is another concept called dependency preserving. Again, go back to the original schema R defined with respect to the ER diagram. Then we observed that a collection of functional dependencies are being observed to hold on R. Again, if I decompose R into smaller schemas, certain attributes are placed in R1, certain attributes are placed in R2. In this process, it may happen that certain functional dependencies may be lost, may not hold. Right? It may happen. So again, that is called dependency preserving. If I can preserve all the dependencies that holds on the original schema R, even after decomposition, then I call it as dependency preserving decomposition. Again, let us see the mathematical definition of this. Let R be a schema, F is set of functional dependencies holds on R, and R is decomposed into two schemas R1 and R2, and let F restricted to R1 is collection of functional dependencies in the original set which are now holding over the attributes of R1. They are basically the original functional dependencies in F, but which are now holding on R1 because R is not there. R is decomposed into R1, R2. So whatever attributes are there in R1, with respect to those attributes, whatever original set of function dependencies that are holding on R, we need to identify. That is F restricted to R1. Similarly, F restricted to R2. That is function dependencies that are holding on R2 because pertaining to the attributes of R2. That is F R2. So because of the decomposition, F is now consisting of two parts, F restricted to R1, F restricted to R2. The problem is that set of functional dependencies that can be generated from these two collections, is it equal to the set that can be generated from the original set F, that is closure of F. So if I take the union F restricted to R1 union F restricted to R2, the collection of functional dependencies, take the closure of that. If this closure is equal to the closure of F of the original set of functional dependencies, that means whatever functional dependency that exists on R in the closure of F should now also be able to be obtained from this union of functional dependencies that are holding individually on R1, R2. That's what it means. If I can get that, then I call the decomposition as dependency preserving. Now we'll see the conditions under which it becomes dependency preserving, the conditions under which it is lossless, decomposition is lossless. Let's observe an example here for lossless joint decomposition and dependency preserving also. For lossless joint decomposition, let us consider a schema consisting of three attributes and instances there consisting of three tuples for three attributes. So there are three objects are there, database objects, entities are there, and for those three entities, three attribute values are stored, A, capital B, capital C. So we have decomposed it into two because of some kind of redundancy that is being observed, and the first instance consists of AB, second instance consists of BC. This is how we have defined the division. Now, if I perform the natural join of AB and BC decomposed into two schemas R1, R2, if I perform the natural join of these two, what do I get is a last table. If you can observe carefully, it consists of data which is not present in the original table. So this table is not equal to the original table. We're getting something new, something not existing before. So this decomposition is useless because it's not, I'm unable to get the original data if I require. This is exactly what I call a lossy decomposition, right? Then under what conditions this decomposition becomes lossless? Yes, there is one condition is given here, that if R is decomposed into two schemas R1 and R2, then R1 intersection R2 should functionally determine entire R1, or R1 intersection R2 should entirely determine R2. That means whatever common attributes are there for both the schemas R1, R2, either they should form a key for R1 or they should form a key for R2. If any one of the things happens, then we say that we can observe that the decomposition is lossless. That's what the condition ensures the lossless joint decomposition is. Now let us come to the second one, the dependency preserving condition. Again, let us observe a schema R with three attributes A, B, C, and let us assume that a set of functional dependencies are given on R, A then B, B then C, and C then A are the three functional dependencies that holds on R. Now because of some reason we decomposed R into two schemas, R1, R2. R1 consists of two attributes A, B. R2 consists of two attributes B, C. Then F restricted to R1, if I go for F restricted to R1, the R1 consists of only two attributes A and B, and the functional dependencies that holds with respect to two attributes is only one, A then B. A then B is the only functional dependency that holds on R1 because of only two attributes are there. This is what is F restricted to R1 in the previous slide. Similarly, F restricted to R2, that means whatever functional dependencies are there in F that holds now on R2 is only one, because B, C are the only two attributes, and B then C is the only functional dependency that holds on R2. So F2 now is B then C. Now if I go for F1 union F2 plus, that is closure of the union of F1 and F2, then I'll get A then B, B then C, and since closure, it may contain A then C now, but C then A cannot be obtained through any combination of Armstrong axioms from these two, A then B and B then C. In whatever sequence you use the Armstrong axioms, you cannot get C then A. That is lost. That do not hold. Whereas C then A holds on F, on R, the original R. So that C then A is lost. Now this decomposition is not dependency preserving. Now we look into the normal forms. Let us start with the first normal form. Given a schema, then if every instance has this property that every field of every instance is atomic. Atomic in the sense it should contain only one value, which is indivisible. Indivisible data should exist in every field. That means it do not allow a list of values, or a set of values is not allowed in any particular field. Every field should be atomic, indivisible. If it is ensured in every field of every instance of the database, we call the entire database is in first normal form. Another normal form that is defined on a given schema is Boyce-Codd normal form, or famously it is known as BCNF. What it says is, given a schema R, let F be set of functional dependencies that holds on R, all possible functional dependencies that holds on R, and let X be a subset of attributes of R, and A is a single attribute. This is how the notation that we use. X indicates a set of attributes, and A, capital A, indicates ABC. We will deal with a single attribute. Then the schema is set, R is said to be in Boyce-Codd normal form if for every functional dependency of the form X then A. That means here the left hand side may consist of set of attributes, but the right hand side should consist of a single attribute. So if for every functional dependency of the form X then A, any one of the two conditions should hold. Either A belongs to X. If A belongs to X, what happens? X then A becomes a trivial functional dependency. That means the given functional dependency should either be trivial, or the second condition is, if it is not trivial, then X should be a super key. If you remember the super key, any set consisting of the candidate key becomes a super key. So now X should be a super key. If this either of the condition happens for every functional dependency that holds on R, then we say that R is in BCNF, or Boyce-Codd normal form. And the entire database is said to be in BCNF if every schema satisfies these conditions with respect to the functional dependencies that holds on respect to schemas. Then we call the entire database is in BCNF. Let us see an example how to check the BCNF conditions on a given schema. Let us start with the schema R consisting of 4 attributes A, B, C, D, and let us assume that the 3 functional dependencies holds on R. C then D, C then A, and B then C are the 3 functional dependencies. To check whether it satisfies the conditions of BCNF or not, first we need to understand what are the keys available on R with respect to the given set of functional dependencies. Because the second condition in BCNF says that X then for every X then A, X should be a super key. So to understand whether it is a super key or not, first we know what are the keys. Now let us try to understand the keys here, to identify the keys here. In this case, we can observe that B is functionally determines C, and B always determines itself because of reflexivity. B determines B, and B then C, C then A. By rule of transitivity, B then A holds. So, and the fourth one is B then C holds, C then D already given. So by transitivity again, B then D holds. That means the attribute B is functionally determining all the attributes. And you can observe that B is a single attribute, so it is minimal. Minimal in the sense no subset of it again has the same property. So it is determining all the function attributes, the first instance, and the second condition is that it is minimal. This qualifies the set singleton B to be a key. Now, the next point is it the only key or any other thing can be a key? So now since B forms a key, no set consisting of B can be a key because it should be minimal. A single attribute is already become a key. So no subset consisting of B can be a key. Now what are the other attributes that are to be tested? C then A holds, and A is not determining anything, so A cannot be a key. C is determining D, A, but C is not determining B, so C cannot be a key. Again, D cannot be a key because C is determining D. D is not determining anything. So single attributes of A, C, D, they cannot be keys. Even if we take the combinations, since C can be obtained only from B, and C is determining all the remaining attributes, no key exists without B. So we can conclude that B is the only key available. But of course, more mathematically rigorously verifiable conditions is that we need to consider all the subsets. For 4 attributes A, B, C, D, we need to consider 2 power 4 subsets, and for each subset we need to verify whether it is a key or not. In the shortcut I am telling here that B is a single attribute, is forming a key, and with the logical conclusions I am observing that B is a single attribute as a key. But more rigorously mathematically we can test all the 16 possible subsets, and for each subset whether it forms a key or not we can test. There is actual original testing that we need to do. So in this case B is a key and is the only key available. Once we understand the keys, the next thing is for each functional dependency we have to test whether that functional dependency satisfies the conditions of BCNF or not. If I start with the first one, C then D, D is not part of the left hand side C because it's also a single attribute. So it's not a trivial one. And C is not a key. So because B is the key, but C cannot be a key. C is not a key. So because of this, both the conditions of BCNF fails with respect to C then D. And even a failure of one functional dependency is enough to say that the schema is not in BCNF. So because of the functional dependency C then D, here I can confirm that R is not in BCNF. Now once we observe that a given schema is not in BCNF, how to decompose it properly so that it is in BCNF? To decompose it, there are a simple two-step process is there. Let us start with the schema R, and if we observe the functional dependencies, let us assume that X then A is the functional dependency because of which there is a failure of failure of BCNF is observed. Then we decompose R into two parts. One is R minus A, that means remove the attribute A from R, you got a new schema now, R1, and you combine the attributes of X and A and form a new schema R2. So now R is decomposed into two schemas, R1 consisting of attributes of R minus A without A, and second schema consisting of attributes of X together with A. This is how we decompose the R into R1, R2. Then what happens? X then A, the functional dependency that holds on R initially, now holds on R2 because XA together form a schema now. So X then A holds on that. And the remaining attributes form the new schema. So again, with respect to the new schemas, we need to test whether both the schemas are in BCNF or not. R2 is trivially in BCNF because X then A is the only functional dependency that holds on R, and X is a key for that R2. So R2 is in BCNF straight away. When it comes to R1, still we don't know what are the other functional dependencies on R1 and whether it is in BCNF or not. So again we'll consider all the functional dependencies that holds on R1 afresh, and we'll test whether it satisfies the conditions of BCNF or not. Again, if you observe a particular function dependency is causing a failure, again decompose R1 into two schemas. Leave R2. Now we decompose R1 into two more schemas, again by the above process. So this process can be continued until we come across smaller schemas where each schema is in BCNF. This is how we can use in a step-by-step process. From a given schema we can arrive at a schemas that satisfies the BCNF conditions. If a single attribute remains, we can club them with a suitable attribute at the end. This is a process. Now we'll see an example how actually this algorithm works. We'll start with a schema R with A, B, C, D, 4 attributes, and let us assume that C then D, C then A, and B then C are the functional dependencies that holds on R. And just like in the previous case, if I verify that C then D violates the BCNF condition. Now we decompose R into two schemas as per the algorithm that we have seen. Remove D from ABCD, so ABC remain, that becomes R1, and CD combined together is forming R2. Another new schema is formed. So now on R1, if you observe the functional dependencies, from the original set only two functional dependencies holds now, C then A and B then C. Whereas on R2, C then D holds. So C then D on R2, C then D holds, so automatically C becomes the key, and only functional dependency that holds on R2, C is a key, and it satisfies the conditions of BCNF because it's a super key. So CT R2 now is in BCNF. So we need to concentrate on R1. If we take R1 again, only two functional dependencies, C then A, B then C. Again, if we go through the process of finding the keys, B then C holds, B then B always holds, B then C then A holds, so B then A holds. So B is a key now. Again, for the R1 also, single B is the only key available. And again, if you verify the BCNF condition, now what happens is C then A. Because of C then A is not part of C then A is not trivial, and C is not a key. Again, the BCNF condition fails on R1 with respect to the functional dependency C then A. This fails. Again, we need to apply the algorithm. We subtract A from R1 now. So once we remove A from R1, BC remain there, and combine A and C and put them into R4. So now R1 is decomposed into R3 and R4. R3 consisting of BC and R4 consisting of AC. When it comes to the functional dependencies again, BC, B then C holds on R3, A then C holds on R4. And individually for R3, B is a key and BC is the only set of attributes that are there. It is in BCNF. And if we take R2, CD is in BCNF because C then D is the only functional dependency that holds. C forms a key for that. And R4 is already in AC. Again, A then C holds, C then A holds, and C is a key. So R4 is also on BCNF. So because of this decomposition, individual smaller schemas now are in satisfying the conditions of BCNF. So this is how we can stop the algorithmic process because all the smaller schemas are in BCNF. But of course here one observation is the algorithm stops here, but here one observation is that even if I combine ACD, then what is the key for that? C then A holds. If I combine ACD, the smaller schemas, C then A, C then D holds, so C forms a key, and two functional dependencies are C then A, C then A. C is a super key for that. So still, even if I combine CD and AC, still ACD and BC is one decomposition that is also in BCNF. That means the algorithmic process ensures us the decomposition into BCNF, but that is not the only way we can do that. We can do it in several ways. That's what I mean to say here. So BCNF, ensuring BCNF can be done through the algorithmic process, but still there are other alternatives with which we can also decompose into BCNF conditions. So to sum up the normal form here, the algorithm that converts the given schema into smaller schemas that satisfies the BCNF ensures the lossless joint decomposition, but it does not guarantee the dependency preserving. And sometimes what happens is we may have other alternatives which are dependency preserving but still satisfy the BCNF conditions. So it is only one possible way to get the decomposition that is lossless, and sometimes maybe dependency preserving or may not be. And alternative decomposition are also possible for satisfying the BCNF conditions.